Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Rebecca Taylor. I'm head of marketing at Enerflo. Thanks for joining the webinar today, co-hosted by Director of Business Development at GoodLeap, Sean Peterson, and Enerflo Co-Founder and CEO, Pat Bennett. I'll hand it over to Pat to get things started.
Yeah, sweet. Thanks, Rebecca and Sean. Great being on with you. Appreciate you joining us today.
Likewise.
Man, GoodLeap TPO. I feel like people have been talking about this for a while, so it's excited we can bring it to market here and talk about the success we're seeing so far and all the good things happening. Just for everyone here, we're going to walk through a couple things. We are going to do a demo to show what the integration looks like, but definitely want to give some context and probably answer a lot of questions you guys probably have around state availability and other things. For those who aren't aware of Enerflo, just a quick overview of who we are: a software platform that focuses on really gluing together the process from lead to PTO. We've been around for a while. It's crazy thinking we started this back in 2019, but from that, we've seen a lot of great partners on the platform and have transacted billions of dollars through Enerflo. To help people understand a little bit more about how we do this, we find talking to installers that they're using a lot of different platforms to get a deal done. And we really consolidate that and bring it together into one. And if you think about that, from all the way from lead management to PTO, there's different things. You got to get a design proposal, do financing integrations, which we'll talk about today, get docs signed, submit the project, track it, keep the customer informed. And we either have an integrated solution with many of the great solutions out there, or we've built our own. And to help see that mix, you probably see a lot of logos here that you might use. These are just some of the integrations that we have. And the whole point of Enerflo is to really be that glue for sales reps and operations folks, so they can live in one platform but have data flowing in and out with all these other great tools that they might be using. So with that, Sean, it'd be great to pass it to you and learn a little bit more about GoodLeap. For those who don't know the name, I think probably everybody knows GoodLeap in solar, but it'd be great to understand too why you guys decided to get in the TPO game, because not all financiers are deciding to do that. So I'll kick it to you for a little bit.
And that was a kind of a perfect tee up for what I was planning to say. So everybody can read the information on the slide for themselves. I'm not going to read what's already in front of you guys to digest, but just to answer Pat's question, what got us into the TPO space. For those of you who don't know our company DNA and where we come from, we've got about 20, 25 folks on our business development team, a dozen business development directors like myself, and then other folks in various leadership or supporting roles. Almost everybody on our team has been in the solar space for 10 to 15 years. We are not new to this. I would say that our primary expertise lies in sales and sales operations from previous lives. Many of us have worked together at 2 or 3 other solar companies prior to coming back home to GoodLeap. The very short version of the GoodLeap origin story, if you will, is like it says on the screen. We were founded in 2003, started as a mortgage company, pivoted into the solar space in 2009, and have since transformed into more of a consumer finance and fintech entity. While we do still have that mortgage component of our business, it's a part of our identity that isn't as prominent these days, as we focus on things more related to solar, home improvement, and technology. But to answer your question, Pat, we are all well versed in TPO. Many of us were selling leases and PPAs going back to 2010. That's when I got into solar. So I can't believe it's been almost 15 years. That feels yeah, it's scary to say that out loud, and makes me feel real old, but that is the reality. So again, many of us, when we got into solar and started selling, loan products were not available, right? And cash was not something that folks were super focused on from a purchase perspective. So leases and PPAs really were our introduction into the solar space 15 years ago or so. Yes, we pivoted over to loans and consumer finance starting in 2018 when we rebranded our company as LoanPal and again as GoodLeap, but that does not mean that we aren't familiar with the lease and PPA space from several years back. So for us, this was a no-brainer. I think part of the reason that I don't want to say drug our feet, that's not the right way to put it, but we're very deliberate in the way that we approach things, is we know that TPO is a complex product. We wanted to make sure that we rolled it out correctly. We wanted to make sure that we found really strong technology partners like the folks at Enerflo to help us launch this platform successfully. So it really has been a labor of love, and we're at the point now where luckily we get to start broadcasting it and talking about it and getting excited as we make it through our beta test phase here. So super appreciative of the opportunity to come on and talk to everybody today, and certainly appreciative of Pat and the rest of the Enerflo team for all they've done to help us out.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, appreciate that background. I think we're going to start with a quick poll here, get a good understanding of who we have on the call. So the two questions here to answer: are you currently approved with GoodLeap for solar loans? So it'd be good to understand from our audience if you guys currently do any GoodLeap deals. And then what are your biggest TPO provider pain points? And hey, these are probably ones you hear, right? Getting paid quickly, system validation, photo requirements, lengthy install timelines, lack of visibility, transparency, or others. So we'll give that a second for people to start answering, and then maybe we can look at the results. But I guess as we're waiting for some of those to come in, how did some of those pain points tie into how you guys wanted to come to market with something? We see getting paid quickly, system validation, photo requirements. I knew some people back in the day, like the Sonova photo requirement process was so arduous and crazy. They just had to make that their process for everything because they didn't want to have to deviate away when they're doing a Sonova job compared to maybe another financer. But yeah, I'm curious how you guys have thought about, okay, if we're going to come to market with something different, how did some of those things play into that decision?
Yeah, I would say those were the main things that we focused on. Was we understood that in terms of rolling out a lease and or PPA product, we weren't going to reinvent the wheel, right? Like the architecture for those types of products, again, has been around for a decade and a half or more at this point. So it wasn't about necessarily trying to come out with a product that in and of itself was fundamentally different for a customer, from a homeowner perspective. It was more so, how do we adjust some of the pain points, or address some of the pain points rather, that we know contractors and sales reps are feeling out there as they're trying to navigate through the TPO space. And I think realistically, for a lot of folks in the industry right now, particularly on the sales side, TPO is still relatively new. Like a lot of people who are selling solar right now have been in the game for 5-ish years. And if they got in 4, 5, 6 years ago, loans were the kind of the dominant product. So that's probably how they learned to sell initially. And a lot of this TPO stuff is new. So we acknowledge that with that newness, both for reps and installers, there's a learning curve. And then to your point, specifically within the various processes for other TPO providers, there's some real pain points in terms of how you navigate from A to Z. So we came to market knowing that there are 3, 4, 5 different things that we hear over and over again when we talk to contractors around, hey, why are you using TPO? And they'll spout off the benefits, and then you peel back the onion a little, and it's not hard to get them to start talking about the things that are really painful about the process. And I think it's fair to say that on a sales rep level, TPO became popular really quickly. Operationally, you talk to a lot of folks on the back end of a construction company, and there's a heck of a lot more pain that they feel trying to get a project to NTP or to install or to PTO. So we knew that those were areas that we needed to address. We're going to talk about that more here in a few minutes, I assume, but things reducing photo requirements, making it easier to pass the validation process, making it easier to get to NTP, doing things like not paying out on a once-a-week schedule for fundings. That's one of the first questions I get when I'm onboarding a contractor for TPO is, cool, so what's your funding schedule look like? And it's an easy answer, because if you're familiar with the loan side, it's the same, right? There is no, we pay out on Fridays or anything like that. It's the same funding schedule. It's super easy. And again, we knew that we needed, if we didn't address pain points that people were feeling both on the front and back end of the solar process, it wasn't going to be a successful rollout. So I think we were very thoughtful and deliberate in terms of how we architected the product, and feel really good based on the feedback that we've received so far.
That's cool. Yeah. And I can say from a technology standpoint, you guys have also been very thoughtful working with the integrators like us. We've been collaborating with your team for over 6 months on this, really trying to dial it in, get it right. Think about those edge cases that come up so often. How do you handle the change order? What about this scenario? We've been able to grind through with your team on finding that best experience. And so I can definitely vouch for the fact that you guys are methodical and trying to create something different operationally. So as we jump in now to learn more about your product, if you want to go over, and to your point, maybe some of this stuff isn't going to be crazy different about what people are used to, but then we can get into some of those other benefits that you guys are touting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the goal of today is to educate everybody at a high level as far as the product is concerned. And then in the event that you guys end up launching with us, obviously there's a lot more detail that we can jump into. But just to go over some of the basics in terms of the way the product works. First of all, when you are selecting the product in Enerflo as an example, we think of solar plus backup battery and solar plus energy shift as 3 different products. Energy shift, by the way, is the same thing as grid tied, arbitrage. Like many terms in our industry, apparently we need 15 different ways to describe the same thing. But if you're wondering what energy shift means, plug in one of those other synonyms. The reason I bring this up though is it's somewhat analogous to anybody who's familiar with our platform and has access to both loans and battery and home improvement products. Those are three different product types, meaning when you're going to sign a customer up and navigate through that application process, the first thing you have to do is choose which product you want to sell. We think of these three different options as different product types within our platform. So yes, they are all leases or PPAs, but they present different potential benefits for the homeowner. So just to start out, think of each one of these as its own unique product within the TPO offering. Currently available in 15 states. We have a third, I'm going to say it's a 30-minute call. It could end up being a 75-minute call some days, but we have a daily TPO call first thing in the morning. And we actually just discussed this a couple hours ago, is kind of which states are we most eager to launch beyond the 15 that are live today. So if you're looking at that map right now and saying, shoot, the state that I want to sell in isn't live yet, I assure you that we are currently collaborating on a very frequent basis with the leadership team to make sure that we roll out as many states as possible, as soon as possible. As far as the product term, it's 25 years across the board. So very simple, unlike loans where you've got everything from 7 years to 25 years to choose from. It's a lease or PPA. It's a 25-year term, pretty standard. The buyout option, it occurs after year 5. They do have the ability to prepay the product beforehand at any point in time, not just after 5 years. But if they do want a true buyout, if they want to own the system, they have that option after the 5th anniversary. And then from a qualification standpoint, it's a minimum 650 FICO score. The thing that I will layer on top of that is for anybody who's familiar with our loan products, there's a ton of overlap in the underwriting criteria. So I'm not going to bore everybody to death. You didn't come here to listen to me rattle off underwriting bullet points. But if you guys know the general outline of how our loans are structured in terms of what qualifies and what doesn't, there's a ton of overlap between loan and TPO. Again, on the FICO side, 650 requirement. However, there is no debt to income ratio requirement for TPO products. So makes it a little bit easier to qualify in that sense. And then as far as some of the product specifications that I think are worth touching on, gosh, see if there's anything we missed here. Savings rule, I would say, is one thing to keep in mind. And I think that's pretty commonly known across most TPO providers, or commonly enforced, I should say. And this is something that's really important to us, and part of our ethos is we want to make sure we are doing right by the homeowner. So with our TPO products, you do have to save at least $1 in that first year. You have to come out of the gates in the first 12 months saving that homeowner money. We're not going to put them in a position where they're paying more for electricity, because obviously that causes a ton of downstream problems, or at least has the potential to. So for us, it was really important to make sure that there was a consumer protection component built into this, several in fact, but that's probably one of the most prominent, is that you do have to save that homeowner money within the first year. So again, I know other vendors have similar rules, but it's something that we're not hiding behind. We're proud to say it. We want to look out for the consumer and make sure that they're getting the benefits of solar. Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. So I know you have people, again, to the state availability. I think you brought this chart to help understand too, that even in California, there are some cases where you can't do solar only. So you probably want to dive into some of those here.
Yep, for sure. And I think California, easy for me to say because I operate on the West Coast. That's my territory. So I'm exposed to California more than some of the other states that are shown here. But certainly in California, there are some nuances. That's a huge market for not just solar, but TPO. If you're in one of the IOUs, so for anybody who's unfamiliar, those are the investor-owned utilities in our state, and they comprise the majority of residents here, right? They service the majority of the state. It's probably a better way to word that. PG&E, Southern California Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric. If you are selling in one of those utilities, you do have to include a battery. It's a requirement based on all the changes that have taken place with the transition to NEM 3.0. Again, going back to 90 seconds ago, we really want to make sure that we're protecting the homeowners and ensuring they're benefiting from solar. So we do require a battery in the IOUs. There are some other utility-specific nuances, probably the most prevalent of which is DWP. For anybody who's selling there, you probably know this already. DWP requires that you sell a lease. It's not necessarily our requirement, it's theirs. And I think you will find some of that across some of the other states as well. But because California is such a big market and we do see so much volume specifically from that state, I wanted to make sure that I touched on some of those nuances. For those of you that end up going live, your business development director, whoever your Sean is, that you work with at GoodLeap will be able to help you guys better understand any market-specific nuances once you guys go live.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these products from PPA and lease standpoint, they're so similar. Do you really find the need to describe to a customer the difference between a lease or PPA, or how do you guys think about that?
No, not a ton. That's actually a great question. So I'm probably 10 TPO trainings deep into the onboarding process right now. Like I mentioned earlier, we're slowly inviting contractors into the beta test program to make sure that we're ready to launch for the entire market. And I don't think I've gotten a single question yet from a sales rep on, hey, help me understand the difference between lease and PPA. At a high level, for anybody on the call who's not familiar, a lease simply means that you are leasing the equipment, in this case from GoodLeap. PPA means you are purchasing the electricity that system produces. That PPA is probably more analogous to what a homeowner is used to in terms of looking at their bill and saying, oh, I'm paying X amount for the kilowatt hours that I used on a monthly basis. That is similar to how a PPA functions. What I always try to impress upon anybody who asks really is from a benefit or savings perspective, they're very similar. I think the nuances come down to one, what the homeowner's preferences might be, and two, whichever product the sales rep is potentially more comfortable explaining and navigating. I always found analogies very useful when I was selling, so I would always gravitate towards something that I could draw comparisons to in terms of other products that a homeowner might be familiar with, a mortgage as an example. But if we're looking at just overall benefit, what's right for the homeowner, which again is something I say, I think on every training. I don't care if you sell a lease, a PPA, or a loan. Does not matter to me whatsoever as long as it's the right product for the homeowner. If we narrow it down specifically to TPO, the savings is pretty comparable across both those products. So again, there are some utilities or territories where you have to sell one or the other. If given the choice, I think it just comes down to what the homeowner's comfortable with and what you feel good about explaining.
Cool. Awesome. Oh, cool. So now we're going to jump into a demo to show how this has come together with our technology teams, which is fun to see. I'll go through, and if you have anything to chime in on or mention, it'd be great to hear your perspective as well. And if we think about the starting point of Enerflo, and many of you have probably seen this before, but the consumption is a really important part, especially with like leases and PPAs, because we have to ensure we're selecting the right starting utility and tariff, and then post tariff rates. Because if we're going to be forecasting savings, especially to your point of getting that first year savings, it's really important we're looking at the right tariffs, right? The right inputs and data is going into that model to determine if they are going to have 1 year savings or not. So in Enerflo, we can create multiple consumption profiles. For those not familiar, we are integrated with GenAbility, just like GoodLeap is, and many other tools out there. That's the standard that we use to pull our rates. And after you select the utility, you can then provide your pre-solar tariff and post-solar tariff. You'll see that the rates will automatically pull in. And again, that's really important as we're trying to determine first year savings and use the same numbers that GoodLeap may be going off of. Obviously, the rep can enter in some actuals. If they don't have actuals for certain months, then we'll forecast out and run a baseline to estimate what those might be. And you can create multiple consumption profiles as well. So if you wanted to show one consumption profile of baseline now, and then you wanted to forecast one if they were going to add an EV vehicle or add additional loads later, you can create that too, and then attach that to a design and then run that through a proposal. So then obviously we need to get a design made. We're integrated with a bunch of tools. Right now you guys have Aurora approved and Arealytic approved and a few other design tools people are using. In this case, we're just showing an Aurora integration where we can kick off that design request. It'll automatically create that profile in Aurora. So then you can jump in, make your changes to the design. Not going to train right now on how Aurora works. I think people are used to knowing how this happens, but can make the changes you need, build that system, get it to the offset or output you want, and then all that data comes back into Enerflo. And one thing we looked at or did as part of this integration is, again, because with TPO, it's so different, we have to validate that 1 year savings. We send a ton of information over to GoodLeap and these savings models to decide, is this good for the consumer? And so we had to deepen our integration with Aurora and other design tools to ensure we have all of that TSRF data and shading values and pitch and tilt and everything needed to come up with those decisions to make it even more accurate. So you should have a level of accuracy even higher than we had before with loan products when we're pulling design information in. So then when we create the proposal, what's cool here is when you select GoodLeap, you can then see that it's going to automatically pull in the products that are available to that customer in that state and that utility. And to point out, if I had a battery, it would also unlock the battery option. So you're not going to run into a scenario where a rep is going to select a battery product if there is no battery. We worked with GoodLeap's team to ensure that only the products available to that customer, based on their design profile, based on their utility, actually show up. And so it makes it really easy for the rep not to select something that actually can't be serviced. So once they select that product, they can then put in the kilowatt rate We give them a range. Again, that range is going to depend on the utility and tariff that they're in. You'll actually see here, and we have this on purpose for the demo, is that this is not passing the first year validation. With what we put in and the rate that was put in by the rep, we can immediately show them that, hey, this isn't going to work for this deal, and give them insight of what they need to do. So it told them they need to increase their kilowatt rate. They then change that to 12 cents. Things start turning green here, which means, hey, that's passing that first year validation. Then you can see over here on the right, it's going to pull back on all that information. What's the EPC value? What's the monthly payment going to be to the customer? What's the kilowatt rate that we're running off of all of our savings modeling on? So once you have a proposal, you can then jump in to the actual customer facing side. We've put a lot of time and energy into adjusting these proposals to speak more to the customer about a lease or PPA, less about ownership and more about zero maintenance and worry, because the GoodLeap is taking on that burden. And so there's just been new content and things created to make it easier for a rep to feel confident in that. And then obviously when we're breaking it down for the customer, we show those lease payments, we bring in the proper disclosures that might be needed for them. We show them what the first year production is going to be, what that rate is, what the term is of the lease. And then when the customer is ready to go forward and they say, yep, this sounds good, let me go into building an agreement inside of Enerflo, just like we have with the GoodLeap finance products. You can fill out the loan application here with the customer, put in all the right information. And then once that's filled in, we can get an immediate response from GoodLeap to know if they're approved or not. So you see that come back, tells the customer they're approved. And then something really cool that we've built as well is helping the sales rep actually know whether the finance docs are signed. So I see this a lot with like brand new reps. They'll go into the home, they'll do a pitch, they'll go to the finance application, they see it's approved, and then they think they're done. They might leave the house, but maybe the consumer hasn't gone into their email, clicked on the GoodLeap docs, actually gone through the DocuSign, finished that process. That's one thing we do to ensure that the rep actually gets that done. And that's something we can hook into our project submission process, where a rep actually can't submit the job to the installer until those loan docs are actually signed and finalized. So you'll actually see that here, where we can go into our email now as the customer. We're going to get this welcome email. We're going to see a document that they need to sign. If it's in the state of California, it'll be that CPUC first, because that is required before it goes into the other one. So that's all built in. They're going to come in and sign the agreement and go through all the disclosures, fill out bank information, whatever else is needed from GoodLeap. But then what's really cool is, as this is happening, and as I mentioned, the sales rep can actually watch from this dashboard in Enerflo. And as soon as those docs are signed, we'll actually see a notification in here. So you actually see now it turned green, telling the rep, yes, they finished their GoodLeap process. You've now done what you need on the finance side. You can now move forward with the product of submitting it to the installer and just make it super clean. So the other cool thing that we're doing here is, this comes up all the time where, hey, I submitted something, goes to the ops team, they find an issue, they're validating the design, they want to make a change. So obviously change orders is like the worst word in solar. Sean, from a technology standpoint, we worked hard to make sure that change order process could occur in Enerflo. But how else have you guys thought about change orders, and what else are you doing to make that as easy as possible for these guys?
Yeah, great question. So I think one thing to call out, one nuance of TPO versus loan for those that are familiar, is 100% of that change order process, it takes place in Enerflo's product. And I actually think that's a positive, because I get that question probably half the time when I'm doing trainings. It's like, hey, do we do this in Origin? Do we do it in Enerflo? And for those who don't know, Origin is our partner portal. We want to keep everybody, particularly sales reps in this example, in the same platform. So with Enerflo, everything takes place there as far as change order is concerned. That information then gets pushed over to us afterwards. As far as review times, I'm certain that's been a pain point with a lot of other TPO providers in this space. Thanks for teeing me up for that one. Our formal SLA states 24 hours. Realistically, our team is getting responses back to contractors much quicker than that, usually a couple business hours, as long as we're operating during normal business hours, I should say. If you ask if there's something that takes place at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, yes, you're probably going to wait till tomorrow to hear back. But if that change order is taking place during normal business hours, in most cases, despite a 24-hour SLA, we're getting back to contractors within a couple hours.
That's a really good point you made of the work we all did together to keep people in Enerflo to make these changes. As you guys have worked over the last few years with integrators, how's that kind of shaped how you think about originating deals? And instead of maybe focusing on your own tech, your own way, for them to jump out and do things. Like, you guys were very focused in the very beginning, as I was talking to you, but we want it all to happen in the integrated platforms. But how has that kind of evolved or shaped your guys' view of rep behavior and how it should work?
Yeah, great question. I think long term, it's an iterative process, meaning will there come a day when you have the ability to do some of this stuff in Origin? Yeah, probably, but we acknowledge that the majority of the time, contractors and sales reps are working through an API integration, right? Most of the time, especially on the sales side, they are not jumping into Origin and doing much. That's more of a back-end slash ops function. So again, we wanted to keep that experience consistent and create a scenario wherein they weren't having to bounce back and forth between platforms. They didn't necessarily need access to both. Yes, you just for clarity's sake, as a sales rep, you do have to have an account within Origin, but there's not a heck of a lot that you do. Most of what you're going to do from a sales perspective or a customer-facing perspective takes place in Enerflo. And again, to Pat's point, that was deliberate because we want to avoid confusion. And we know that there have been times on the loan side when maybe that's a little muddy, probably more so for sales reps. I think a lot of times the operations slash admin teams, they live and breathe that world 24/7, so it's a bit more familiar. On the sales side, more often than not, they are living in that integrator on the front end. So it can be a little challenging to require them in certain scenarios to jump into our platform to do something. We really wanted to make it as seamless and easy as possible for everyone. So on the sales side, to your point, Pat, we wanted to empower them to stay in the same platform and not have to learn two things at once on top of learning a new TPO process.
Yeah, and I think that's huge and a big shift we've seen over the last couple of years. If you think about Sonova, SunPower, and even Everbright, the way they've done it is you have to do everything in there. You only can do their products. Their tools and tech won't work for other things, and they created these ecosystems. And I feel like over the last really year and a half or 2 years, a lot of that has been decoupled. And I feel like the providers that are coming and doing an integrated first approach, making it more open, allowing these different platforms, because Enerflo is not the only one for sure. You guys work with many others, which I think is great for the industry to meet people where they are. But I think that shift of financiers thinking, let's go to more of a distributive model, I think is really critical. And we've seen that play out really well compared to some of these closed ecosystems that have tried to just keep it all. So then hey, if I have to do a Sonova job, I have to do it all over in this thing. And then if I'm ever doing GoodLeap Finance or other stuff, I have to have a whole nother platform. And I just don't think that's great for the industry and change orders and operational efficiency and all those things. So I think you guys have done a really good job in looking at more of an integrator first approach.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, it was a very big consideration early on as we were architecting the TPO product. What direction do we go? And you just hit the nail on the head, Pat. Are there scenarios in which it might make sense for somebody to operate in our platform? Yes, there are, but we don't want to force people to learn yet another technology platform that they might not already be familiar with. And the reality is, again, specifically for sales reps, a lot of times they're not super familiar with our portal because that has more to do with kind of the back end post-sale process. So let's keep them in a tool they're familiar with. Let's not require them to learn an entirely new platform. Yeah, they have to learn some nuances of the GoodLeap TPO product and process for sure, just like you would with any financier. But we also want to keep you in a place where you're already comfortable and knowledgeable and where you feel safe, for lack of a better word.
For sure. Cool. Let's go into kind of recap the next steps, and then we'll jump to Q&A for anybody who has questions. I think this is probably more for you guys listening. When we took the poll earlier, we actually didn't talk about the results. 71% of people on today are using GoodLeap. So a lot of them are probably like, hey, how do I get this product? And so maybe you can talk through that. And then anyone who's maybe not a GoodLeap customer, how your onboarding works and underwriting. And then we'll go to questions.
Cool. Yeah, so on the first piece, good call out. So for anybody who is already on our platform, there is a separate, for lack of a better description, TPO underwriting process that you will go through. And it's not for those that have onboarded with us on the loan side, and I'll say this on a recorded call, like we are well aware of the fact that getting through the underwriting process for loans is a bit of a heavy lift, particularly in comparison to other lenders. That's deliberate on our end. If I'm being brutally honest with everybody on the call, we want to make sure that we are working with reputable, strong contractors who are going to be around for a long time. So we put in some extra work on the front end, or ask you guys to. We definitely do our due diligence to make sure that we're working with the right companies. So for anybody who's got maybe a little bit of PTSD from that process, it is nowhere close to the same lift to get through the TPO underwriting process. But there are a few extra steps. So again, whoever your Sean is, whoever your business development director is, they can help walk you through that. But in general, I would say depending, and not to put the ball back in the installer's court, but depending on how quickly they can move and get some of these deliverables back to us, I've seen it happen in a week or less. So it does not have to be a long drawn out process by any means. And then what was the second question you asked, Pat? I apologize, I'm blanking.
Just for brand new people who've never worked with GoodLeap,
Oh,
just
gotcha.
what that might look like.
Yeah, so we do have a lead intake form on our website. We've got a really solid team. 3 of the 4 of them literally sit right outside my office, so I could throw a tennis ball right now and hit all 3 of them that will basically work with any contractor who's looking to get on the platform. The big caveat, or I should say the qualification criteria that's number 1 on our list, is you do have to be a licensed contractor. So that's the first gate to pass through, if you will. But we've got a really strong intake team that works with our underwriting group. They will help you guys navigate through the application process, set expectations, answer any questions up front, and then be your liaison with the underwriting team as we get you through. But yeah, just feel free to submit an application, and you will usually get a response back same day. But again, those guys are great at their jobs. So worst case scenario, you might wait 24 hours.
Yeah, and then as far as anyone currently doing loans, as soon as you get approved for TPO, we can turn on an Enerflo very fast. So we've created switches and things where as soon as it's greenlit on GoodLeap, we get your TPO keys and it can go live that same day. So it's very fast on the Enerflo side as well, get you guys up and running.
Yeah, and to give you guys credit too, you guys have developed some really helpful PDFs and one sheets that make it really simple and easy for the contractor to understand what needs to be done on their end. Like we send out on our side kind of the equivalent of a pre-launch checklist, if you will, and the material that Enerflo has armed us with has made it really simple for the contractors that onboard. So thank you guys for putting the thoughtfulness into those assets.
Oh, that's great. All right, let's jump to questions. We can probably take those for the next 5-10 minutes and then we'll wrap it up here. Rebecca, if you've been monitoring that and you got some you want to send our way, we can divvy them up between me and Sean.
All right, I do, and I have, and Sean has been busy throughout answering things
nice.
in real
Thank you.
time. Okay, so what happens when the homeowner wants to sell the house? What is the process to transfer? Any penalties? Is there a guaranteed transfer to the new homeowner?
No penalty. They can transfer whenever they like. Going back to the question about buyout, or not the question, but the bullet point, we were going through some of the product stuff a little bit ago. They do have a buyout option after the 5th year anniversary. They can prepay or transfer at any point. So there is no fee to do it. It's a relatively straightforward process. They would basically reach out to our team and help them navigate through it. But it's not as though they have to have been enrolled in that TPO product for X amount of time. Theoretically, they could do it in the 2nd year if they wanted to.
Great. Okay, so the next question, can I use this to finance small commercial or industrial projects? For example, gas station, small strip malls, garages, or office buildings?
At this point, no. And this is something that I usually lead all trainings with, whether it's residential or TPO. Is for right now, we're focused on the residential space. I get questions every now and then about commercial, and it's definitely something that folks are interested in. If I'm being candid with the audience, it's not an area where we had an overwhelming amount of feedback in terms of need. Yes, there are folks that would leverage it for sure, but we knew we needed to focus on the residential side first and have a successful launch there. So I can't say that it's on the roadmap anytime soon, but it's also something that we've talked about internally, both on the loan and TPO side. So might be something that we bring to market down the road. For right now, we're really focused on a successful residential TPO launch.
Perfect. How about adders, GM, roofs, etc.?
Yeah, so you do have the ability to include adders in the TPO projects. I think to keep this simple and at a high level, and I think everybody's aware of this, there's less flexibility on the TPO side than there is on the loan side. So I think one of the strong points for us on the loan side is the ability to create these bundled packages, if you will, where you're selling solar and HVAC and a re-roof and providing a ton of benefit for the homeowner if they've got some ancillary needs in addition to solar. The way to think of TPO is that any of the adders really need to be a prerequisite for solar. And here's maybe a good way to explain that. Hey, this homeowner cannot go solar unless they get an MPU. It's that simple. They need an MPU in order to get solar on the roof. Cool, you can roll that in. Versus, hey, the homeowner really wants HVAC. Okay, on a loan, that's fine. They can roll that in. On the TPO side, that's not a prerequisite for solar, so it's not allowed. I think that's probably a simple way to bucket it, especially for anybody who's familiar with our loan products, as we look at adders as solar-ready add-ons or home energy efficiency upgrades. Think of TPO as only the solar-ready add-ons are the ones that would be eligible.
And then
The very short answer is yes.
Yeah, and then just to piggyback on the Enerflo side, there is a step in onboarding where you map your adders. Any adder in Enerflo, you're going to map it to a GoodLeap TPO category, and that'll ensure that when you add the adder to the project, it gets sent to GoodLeap properly and is part of the calculations. So that is an important step, but we make it pretty easy and seamless on Enerflo.
Yeah, said.
Cool. All right, let's have a couple more. Someone is asking when the Carolinas will be available, north and south.
Here we go. Here we go.
And also, does this system show savings if a battery is attached?
Yes to the second question. It depending on the scenario, I should add an asterisk there that everything is scenario specific. But yes, depending on the market too. And I think that's probably where that question is rooted in is, hey, there are certain markets where it is harder to show savings than others. In a broad sense, across the markets that I'm familiar with, yes, you can still show savings with a battery in most cases. Specific to the Carolinas, I manage the West Coast, so I don't care. I'm kidding. I do manage the West Coast, but I have, again, been in enough 8:30 morning calls for the past 3 months to know that my peer who does work primarily in the Carolinas has been super adamant about getting those added. I don't know off the top of my head exactly what the roadmap looks like, but going off of memory, I think we're looking at probably early Q1 for the Carolinas. What I can say is that it is a very well-known need as far as states to open up. There are others that we don't hear a whole lot of. I'm going to pick on Mississippi as an example. Nobody's beaten down our door to open up Mississippi, but for sure the Carolinas are at the top of the list.
Yeah, on that second question too, I want to add on a little bit too. Over the last 6 months, Enerflow's made a lot of investment into our savings engine. And that was actually really good timing for this GoodLeap launch. So just so you guys are all aware, most of the savings data and inputs that come into GoodLeap to determine first year savings are actually generated by Enerflow. So it's actually our savings calculator that is looking at, okay, I'm adding a battery, it's self-consumption mode in California. What impact do I have on savings? And we've been working really closely with GoodLeap's team over the last few months to validate those numbers, and we all feel really comfortable about it. So if you are adding a battery, obviously backup, you're not really going to show savings because you're not using it to kind of mess with rates or that energy shift mode. But in those states like Arizona and California where energy shift is critical, you will see savings when you're adding those batteries in.
Yeah, thank you for adding the caveat there, Pat. 100%.
All right, there was a comment that the website, the landing page isn't working, and it's working on my end, so I will look into that. But also, and I don't think we have time for this, but Pat, it'd be interesting to know what your thoughts are. They just want to ask if we can actually preview how we can manage change orders between Enerflow and GoodLeap. I don't know that we have time for that, but I don't know if there's a way.
Yeah, we don't really have time, or my demo's not set up to do that. But essentially, you can visualize the demo I was walking through. If you're familiar with the Enerflo platform, after something is finalized and signed, that application stage will say, okay, the application's done. There's now a button that's added that makes it very easy where it's, I need to start a change order. What that's going to do is then unwind the deal back to the proposal stage. You then make the changes you want, rerun the savings and calculations to GoodLeap, click finalize. And what's really cool is it'll then detect, okay, is it within a threshold? And if it's within a certain threshold, the customer doesn't have to sign anything new. And all that information will be sent over to GoodLeap. If it's outside of thresholds, like maybe the system size changed by 20% or production is way different than it was before, that will require a new signing by the customer, but it's shown in Enerflow and it's clear to the rep of what they need to do in those situations. As you guys get on trainings and go deeper with our team, we can go into that more, but we have tried to make it pretty easy for the rep to know how to manage those.
Thank you. All right, I think we have time for a couple more. What does the buyout look like for lease versus PPA? And I'll just ask also what happens at the end of the 25-year term.
Yeah, so as far as buyouts concerned, make sure I understand the question. As far as I know, no fundamental difference for the price point. I think part of where this question is leading to, is there a price difference between the prepay versus the buyout? And if you look at the homeowner agreement, they're identical. So we've got two different columns, one that lists the prepay, one that lists the full buyout if they want to own the system. It's the same dollar amount either way. Again, they don't have the option for that buyout until the 5th year anniversary, but the totals for both are the same. As far as what happens at the end, obviously homeowner has the ability to have the system removed, or we will renew the agreement in 2-year increments starting at year 25 if they opt in.
Perfect. What's the max price per watt?
It depends on the utility. Yeah, there's no blanket answer, and I know where that question's coming from. It's similar to on the loan side, right? Like, hey, it's a 650 cost per watt cap. In TPO, it is driven by the utility, so it's very market specific.
Yeah, the nice thing is it's all in Enerflo. So if you try to go above a cap, it'll tell you and it'll stop you. So you're not going to hit this case where you sell a deal that then you find out is above the cap and then you have to go to a change order. It actually won't let you proceed if you're hitting caps or not hitting that 1 year savings threshold. So we try to make it really easy to know as a rep as you're pricing the deal, is this actually going to work out or not? Because maybe take one more and then we'll wrap it up.
All right, let's see. How about building a solar patio or a structure needed for the homeowner to go solar, or like a carport to put solar on top, something like that?
I'm going to defer to our design and commissioning standards document that I don't have committed to memory. There are more, I would say, rules in place for TPO versus loan. As far as I'm aware, you can't build anything and roll it into the TPO product. If they have a pre-existing permitted structure, in most cases, you're going to be okay. But this isn't a scenario where you can construct something that doesn't yet exist for the purpose of a TPO product. And again, we have a very detailed design and commissioning standards document that we send out to anybody who gets approved that has all the detail about eligible roof types, what you can and can't do. So I'm gonna defer to that document since I don't have it entirely committed to memory. But at a high level, again, a little bit less flexibility there than on the loan side. But speaking in broad terms, if you're installing on a pre-existing permitted structure, you should be okay.
Fantastic. All right.
Awesome.
That was
Well,
great. I know we had some more questions we didn't get to, but what we'll try to do is comb through those and reach out directly with any additional answers or context for that. And anything do you want to add to close?
No, just as a reminder, we will send the recording, and even maybe in our email back, we can answer some of these additional questions. Appreciate all you jumping on and listening to it. Thank you, GoodLeap, for your partnership over the last 6-8 months as we've been working on this. I'm really proud of what both teams have created and think that this is going to be really great as people see it and use it and see how easy it is and then all the value you guys create. So I'm really excited for this partnership.
Yeah, the feeling's 100% mutual, and thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to participate today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks everybody. Good luck selling out there. And we'll see you next time.